You probably have heard of Egypt's Suez Canal. Opened on November 17, 1869, this Franco-British engineering marvel quickly became important to international trade because it halved the time needed to sail from Europe to the ports of East Africa, India, or China. While you may be familiar with this canal, you might not know that over 3,000 years ago, an ancient Suez Canal existed. This canal was established, neglected, and re-established by many rulers of Egypt throughout classical history. Periods of renewed interest in the canal saw increased exploration and trade in the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. Please keep watching if you want to learn how this vital waterway increased economic and cultural growth in Egypt and beyond. The ancient Suez Canal, also known as the Canal de Pharaohs, stood at a crossroads for trade between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Civilizations like the Egyptians and Persians understood the canal's strategic importance and utilized it to bolster trade in the Red Sea to increase their wealth and power. The land of Punt. Before we continue, it's important to ask the question, why would the ancient Egyptians build an expensive canal to the Red Sea? One major reason was to increase the lucrative gold trade with the people of Punt, who lived in modern-day Eritrea. As early as 2256 BC, or 4,581 years ago, the gold trade was documented as occurring overland under the pharaoh Khufu of the 4th dynasty. And only about 70 years later, under the reign of Pharaoh Sahure of the 5th dynasty, another expedition was recorded. Part 2. Sesostris. It is in this context of a lucrative but difficult trade with Punt that the legendary Sesostris built a canal. While a legendary figure, ancient historians attribute his works to Senusret I of the 12th dynasty, who lived 3,996 years ago. Aristotle in his Meteorology wrote that Sesostris is said to have been the first of the ancient kings to try to build a canal, but he found that the sea was higher than land and stopped. This account is also supported by the writings of Pliny the Elder and the Greek geographer Strabo. While these Greek historians thought that Sesostris did not complete a canal with constant sea access, this early attempt may have given the Egyptians temporary access to the Red Sea, coinciding with the rainy season. Sesostris likely dug an irrigation channel in 1848 BC from present-day Zagzig on the eastern Nile Delta along the dry Y-Tumilat River valley due west to Lake Timash. During the flood season, the canal swelled, allowing for a navigable channel into the lake. At this time, floodwaters and runoff from Lake Timash formed a seasonally navigable river due south into the Bitter Lakes, which at the time were naturally connected to the Red Sea because of its higher sea level 3 to 4,000 years ago. After Sesostris, trade with Punt continued during the 12th dynasty, with pharaohs Amenemhat II and Amenemhat III successfully navigating there to trade. This was likely facilitated by the new canal. This idea became a part of the Egyptian culture of the time, as trading and navigation along the mysterious Red Sea toward the land of Punt was reflected in popular Middle Kingdom stories, such as the tale of the shipwrecked sailor. Chapter 3. Hatshepsut. 230 years later, under the 18th dynasty, the canal was still in use, and trade with Punt continued and expanded under Hatshepsut. She built a dedicated Egyptian Red Sea fleet to facilitate trade and personally sailed south to bring back holy goods for the temple at Karnak in exchange for Nubian gold. Here is what Egypt looked like during this period. After her expedition, the Punt was described as land of the gods, a region far to the east in the direction of the sunrise, blessed with products for religious purposes. Scribes also noted that she and her traders returned to Egypt with gold, ivory, ebony incense, aromatic resins, animal skins, live animals, eye makeup, cosmetics, fragrant woods, and cinnamon. The rewards of such a trade network clearly outweighed the risks. Once she became queen, Hatshepsut ensured that ships regularly crossed the Red Sea by way of the canal to obtain bitumen, which is a kind of oil-based adhesive, copper, carved amulets, and naphtha, a type of liquid petroleum. On the walls at her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, there is a drawing of Punt's landscape. Here we see several houses on stilts, 2 fruiting date palms, 3 myrrh trees, which produce a fragrant resin, a Nile Valley sunbird, a cow, a fish, and a turtle. At this Deir el-Bahari temple complex, a trunk of a myrrh tree, which produces a fragrant resin, still stands. Archaeologists believe that this tree was brought by Hatshepsut's expedition from the land of Punt. Chapter 4. Necho II. The next time an Egyptian pharaoh took interest in the canal was about 900 years later, in 610 BC. Over this time, much of the canal had deteriorated. Countless rainy seasons brought the Nile silt and sand into the canal, clogging it so that it was impassable for any vessel. Responding to this deterioration, Necho II dredged much of the original paths of the canal, but also expanded the original irrigation channels to allow for more year-round navigation. While the trade with Punt seems to have diminished during this time, Pharaoh Necho II is reported to have used the canal for a voyage much farther than Eritrea. According to Pliny, he hired Carthaginians, some of the best sailors of the time, to circumnavigate Africa at some point between 610 and before 594 BC. The voyage started by exiting the canal, sailing south down the Red Sea past the Horn of Africa. From there, these sailors were tasked with following the coastline back to the Pillars of Hercules, modern-day Gibraltar and Ceuta. From this point, the voyage would sail back to Egypt. It's said that this path was successfully sailed in 3 years, from the Red Sea around Africa back to the mouth of the Nile, and would thereby be the first completion of the Cape route around Africa. Herodotus also had an account of this tale, which was handed down to him by oral tradition. Despite this, the story is seen as credible by historians because Herodotus stated with disbelief that, quote, as the Phoenicians sailed on a westerly course round the southern end of Libya, Africa, they had seen the sun on their right, to the northward of them. Herodotus, The Histories, Chapter 4.42. This indicates that the Phoenicians may have indeed sailed around the continent, since only in the southern hemisphere would the sunrise and sunset be northward. This represents a tremendous achievement for the ancient Egyptians, especially considering the limited navigation technology and relatively small boats available in the ancient world. Sadly, this would be the last great achievement of the authentic Egyptian rulers taking place at the Pharaohs' Canal. Going forward, the canal would again be abandoned as Egypt's prestige waned. However, Persians, Greeks, and eventually Romans would all leave their mark on the canal, shaping the course of ancient history and building trade networks on a scale the old pharaohs could only imagine. If this interests you, tune in next week as we continue the story of the Pharaohs' Canal. Thank you again for watching. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to keep seeing content like this, make sure to subscribe so you see when I post my next video. Thank you again.